bestrobo.in, your favorite robotic and electronics store in India.
Hello everyone, welcome to Mitra Tech. Today in this section we will learn about a Raspberry Pi microcontroller. So this is a Raspberry Pi will look like. So here mainly we are using Raspberry Pi 3. So this Raspberry Pi 3 is a development board in Pi series. So it mainly you can also considered as a single board computer. It mainly works on Linux operating system. You can use it in Windows also. So it has a lot of features in it. So the underlying architecture or the chip used in this Raspberry Pi 3 or Raspberry Pi is BCM2837, which is also similar to BCM2836. So what is the difference between a version that is Raspberry Pi 2 and Raspberry Pi 3 is, in Raspberry Pi 2 we are using ARM version 7 quad core cluster, but in Raspberry Pi 3 we are using ARM version 8 quad core cluster. So this ARM mainly runs at 1.2 gigahertz. So that is why it making this Raspberry Pi 3 50% faster than the Raspberry Pi 2 version. It has a video core 4 version 4 that is runs at 400 megahertz. So it can also provide a wireless LAN and Bluetooth connectivity. That Raspberry Pi model version 3, as I told, it has a ARM version 8.3 with 1 GB RAM. So that version 3 has mainly two major upgrades. That is, first is a next generation quad core Broadcom BCM2837. A 64-bit ARM version 8.3 processor is used in this Raspberry Pi 3. This is the processor used. This processor has a speed of this processor is up to 1.2 gigahertz is there. In compared to Raspberry Pi 2, it has only a 900 megahertz. The second upgrade is the addition of a built-in BCM 43143 Wi-Fi chip is there in this Raspberry Pi 3 module, which is allowing Pi 3 to go wireless without any additional peripherals. It has an inbuilt Wi-Fi chip in it. You can use it also. It has a LAN, it has Bluetooth and also Wi-Fi. So what are the specification of this Raspberry Pi version 3 is, it has a quad core, as I told, 1.2 gigahertz Broadcom BCM2837 64-bit CPU that is processor. It has a 1 GB RAM, and it has a BCM43438 that is a wireless LAN and a Bluetooth low energy on board. There is a Bluetooth also present in the board. It has a 100 base Ethernet, a 40 pin extended general purpose input output pins. It has 4 USB 2 ports are there. Then operating power is between 5 volts or 2.5 to 3 amps. So you can give this is the operating voltage. The other specification is, it has a full size HDMI port, a CSI camera port for connecting Raspberry Pi camera. It has a DSI display port for connecting Raspberry Pi a touchscreen display. You can connect here. There is a micro SD port in order to insert any storage card, micro SD card, and you can also upgrade this switch through micro USB power source up to 2.5 amps. So what are the different features of this Raspberry Pi 3 means, it has a processor that is Broadcom BCM2387 chip, and it has a 1.2 gigahertz quad core ARM Cortex A53 that is 64-bit, and the Wi-Fi used is 802.11 and a wireless LAN and Bluetooth version 4.1 it has, and it has a that is graphical processing unit, that is a dual core video core version 4. So the operating system is, it is mainly boots from the micro SD card, that is a running version of a Linux operating system. You can also use it in Windows 10 IoT applications. So what are the connectors and ports present in it means, it has a Ethernet, that is a base T Ethernet socket. It has a video output HDMI port and a composite RCA port is there. For audio, it has a audio output 3.5 mm jack is there, HDMI port is there, and 4 USB 2.0 ports are there, and a general purpose input output connector. It has a 40 pin, the 2.5 mm pins are there. Providing mainly there are 27 general input output pins available here, and for a camera connector there is a 15 pin MIPI camera serial interface is there, that is CSI2. For in order to connect the display, there is a DSI, that is display serial interface connector also it has. and it has also a memory card slot in order to in order to insert any micro SD card. So these are the different things present in this Raspberry Pi 3. So as you can see, two USB ports here. There is a network pin, and as you can see for audio and video, this is the port, a CSI camera port, HDMI port, a micro USB power cable. Through this you can provide power supply. There is a display port, that is DSI port. In order to, there is a micro SD in order to insert the SD card, and there is a Bluetooth version 4.1, Wi-Fi, and general purpose input output pins. These are things. Then there is a CPU, GPU, and memory also present here. This is the chip, that is BSM chip, main processor present here. So these are the different things present in Raspberry Pi 3. So next we'll see the parts identifications. So Ethernet, it is the base T Ethernet socket it has. USB, that is version 2.0 version. There are usually 4 sockets available here. Audio output, we are using 3.5 mm jack and a HDMI we can use. For video output we can use this HDMI port. For in order to connect the camera, we have a 15 pin MIPA camera serial interface, that is a CSI2, and there is a DSI, that is display serial interface, in order to connect external display. And for memory card slot, there is a push or pull micro SD space is there in order to connect the memory card. So next we will see the pin configuration of this Raspberry Pi 3. So as you can see, these are the different pins present in this here. So it mainly has a 5 volts pin in order to provide the power supply, the 3.3 volts. These are the onboard supply provided by this Raspberry Pi. And next it has a different general purpose input output pins and several ground in order to connect the ground, as you can see, and it has. So these are the different things different pins present in this Raspberry Pi. It also has pins for SPI communication, as you can see, MOSI, MISO, serial clock. So these are, it can be these things, that is pin number 10, 9 and 11 of general purpose pins can be used for SPI communications. So you can see pin number 14 and 15 can be used for UART, that is serial communication, that is transmitter and receiver pin it has. So you can also do UART communication or SPI communication through this. So mainly what are the different pins mainly used for power source means there is a 5 volts, a 3.3 volts, ground and VIN. These are the 4 pins you can use for power source. So this 5 volts and 3.3 volts mainly provide respectively 5 volts and 3.3 volts pin. So through this onboard power it will be provided, that can be connected to any sensors or actuators connected to this Raspberry Pi. And in order to communication interface, it has UART, as I shown you, transmitter and receiver pin, that is GPI 14 and 15 pin. For SPI interface, it has MOSI, that is master out slave in, master in slave out pin and clock pin. So those you can use for serial peripheral interface. And it has a there is 2i interface pin also, that is serial clock and serial data pin. Then input output pins it has, that is there are 26 input output general input output pins you have, and it also has a pulse width modulation pins, that is PWM, that is pin number 12, 13, 18 and 19 of general purpose pins you can use. And you can also generate external interrupt pins. So all input output pins you can use in order to generate any external interrupts. So these are the different pins present here. So where Raspberry Pi 3 is generally used, like wherever you are using any microcontroller, instead of that you can make use of this Raspberry Pi, like where instead of Arduino also you can make use of this Raspberry Pi 3, because it has a lot of high-end features when compared to Arduino. And where the system processing is used, as I told, most of the Arduino boards will have only less clock speed, that is less than 100, but this Raspberry Pi version 3 has a very high clock speed, that is 1.2 gigahertz clock speed, and it also has a RAM size of 1 GB. So it has a very like unique features and high-end features when compared to Arduino, and it has a very good wireless Wi-Fi and inbuilt LAN you can use, and Bluetooth connectivity also available. And it has a like a dedicated port for in order to connect the camera and LCD for this, or any display unit for this Raspberry Pi. And you can also has a PWM outputs, we can use application. So how to use this Raspberry Pi means, so for the in order to use this Raspberry Pi, what we have to do means, first we have to install an operating system. This feature is similar to PC, like the Raspberry Pi mainly works on a dedicated OS for it. because it does not, any other OS will not, it will not work. So for that there are some step is there in order to install this. First what we have to do is we have to take an any micro SD card, and there we have to specifically install any Raspberry like OS required for this, that is Linux OS required for this Raspberry Pi. Then we have to download those OS software. Then we have to insert this SD card in this Raspberry Pi. After the installation, we have to connect the monitor and keyboard, mouse, anything we can connect here. After that we have to power this with a micro USB connector. We have to power this Raspberry Pi board. When it is whenever it is turned on, the OS is installed on the memory card will start from the boot. So whenever the OS is completely installed, what happens is, once all the drivers are checked, the Raspberry Pi will ask for the authorization. So after that we have to set by default, and we can also change the authorization. After the authorization, we have to reach the desktop where our application program development will start. So in this way you can install this Raspberry Pi using this SD card. After installing Raspberry Pi successfully, after powering it, you can program it according to the different projects where you are using this Raspberry Pi as a microcontroller. So what are the advantages of using this Raspberry Pi means, it is a small you can call it as a small computer itself. It works as a normal computer at relatively but a low price it will work. It is possible to work as a low cost server to handle a light internal or web traffic. So you can use this because it has a lot of features in it, like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth inbuilt features available in this Raspberry Pi. You can use it in different specific applications. So what are the application of this Raspberry Pi means, it is of low cost, as I told. You can use it in IoT applications, media center, robotics, industrial or home automation, in server or cloud server, print server, in security monitoring, web camera, gaming, in wireless access points, and environmental sensing or monitoring station like weather monitoring, home automation. In different applications you can make use of this Raspberry Pi microcontroller. So thank you for watching the video. Thank you.